Okay, so Carlos, we'll go ahead and start with you. Please give us your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you so much. When I got to the YCC, I expected to be working on policy projects related to the passions I talked about in my campaign. I want to talk about the wait line at the Packard Center and address issues like how many students couldn't afford laundry. When I got to the Senate, there was a very different reality. Policy came from the president down, not the people up. The Senate showed me what was wrong with the YCC, but the fight for UP showed me how to fix it. UP was a hard fight, one where we brought more voices to the table than ever before, and one of the largest movements in Yale student recent history. From UP, we learned that policy is best made when we incorporate more people, when we debate publicly, when we defend our ideas, when we listen closely and change when necessary. UP's example of policy from the people. From UP, I learned what was possible, but the moment is what inspired me to run. In times like these, when everything else has changed, from the way that we attend classes, the way we're having this debate, it's incredibly important the YC changes as well. We need a YC that's more responsive, a YC that's dynamic, a YC that actually listens to the student body and gives senators who are elected as representatives the opportunity to represent their constituents, to set the priorities for the YCC. I run as an independent candidate for vice president, not because I couldn't find a president, but because I want to bring special attention to this issue, to the role of the vice president. I'm the only candidate on the stage who made that decision, who has specific vision for how the Senate can be reformed, the Senate, which is the chief responsibility of the vice president, to make sure that things get done in the interest of Yale students. Look, people ask me, why didn't you wait, Carlos? But as John Lewis loved to say, if not now, then when? So my question to all of you in this moment, we can't wait for change, is why not now? Thank you.
Should I begin? Okay. I am not the conventional candidate to be running for this position, but the time calls for new voices outside of the YCC to implement comprehensive reform. I have a deep connection with the city, its community, and the students on campus. When my parents first came to this country, one of my mother's first jobs was at Atticus. I was born at St. Raphael's right in New Haven and grew up 10 minutes down the road in West Haven. When vacations come around, students leave, while I, along with the rest of the city, stay. When I came to Yale, I did not set up my time geared towards student government. However, all of the work I did on and off campus has been geared towards uplifting the voices of members of my community. I'm a first-generation, low-income student of color that understands firsthand the tangible consequences of YCC policy. Both of my parents were hospitalized due to COVID-19, and both were left unemployed during these difficult times. Abby and I are running because we understand firsthand how essential healthcare is. We understand FIGLY issues, and we understand that we can't do it alone. We are living at a critical point where we must include outside voices, student leaders, and community members into our policies if we hope to achieve a Yale that's better for all of us. Each policy written on our platform is meticulously researched and written because Abby and I have vested interests in their outcome. Not only that, but we are fully aware that we need to include other voices in policies because it'll be impossible and irresponsible to advocate for other communities without their direct support and input. Our platform was made in a joint effort with student leaders from student organizations, and we are committed to fully support and empower these groups if elected into office. Thank you.
Riley, go ahead and please give us your 2-minute opening statement.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Riley, and I'm running to be the vice president of the Yale College Council because I know that Yale needs work. We have an endowment that actively profits off of climate injustice, an unaccountable private police force, inaccessible mental health care, insufficient support for FGLI students. The list goes on. But I also know that we are a part of Yale, and we have the power to make change. From my 2 years of experience on the YCC, I've seen how we can make a real difference. From co-writing the resolution to endorse UP, to working on Title IX procedures, to ensuring that quarantined students had access to safe sex supplies and menstrual hygiene products, I have experience both inside and outside of the YCC making those positive changes. From these experiences, I learned the ins and outs of policymaking. I developed the skills to help me serve you. But these experiences don't just make me qualified, they make me ready to take over on day one. Elisa and I created a platform that addresses over 30 campus issues because we know that whoever wins on Friday starts on Friday, and there's never been a more important time to start now. No student can be ignored. I see myself as a part of a long line of activists and advocates that came before me. After all, I'm allowed in this college because of the student organizers that led Yale to co-educate. I will continue in that tradition and leave something behind for those who come after me. The YCC I envision pays attention to the needs of every student. It combats racism, it supports FGLI students, it empowers women. It shows up for international students, LGBTQ+ students, and students with disabilities. It prioritizes mental health, it works to prevent and respond to sexual misconduct, and it strives for sustainability and endowment justice. It centers activists and amplifies their message. In all that it does, our YCC pursues justice, equity, and safety. This is the YCC Elisa and I will create. Between our extensive experience and comprehensive platform, we are best prepared to hit the ground running and give you the Yale that you deserve.
Awesome, thank you, Riley. So we're gonna go ahead and move into the full answer questions. The candidates will have a maximum of 2 minutes to answer these questions. And at 1:30, we will give them a warning that they have 30 seconds to end.
Okay, so we have our first question. We're gonna do a rotation of who answers first. So I'll just call out the names. And for this question, it's going to be Carlos, Matt, and then Riley. So the first question is, could you name 3 administrators that you'd like to work with, their titles, and the projects that you aim on working with them on? So the first would be Carlos.
Yeah, so I think I would start with my efforts to address mental health with Paul Hoffman, who's director of Yale Health. I would work with him to make sure that counselors on the websites have pictures and biographies. Next would be Dean Chun, Dean of Yale College. I'd work with him specifically on issues related to academics and accessibility, specifically making sure that we have more opportunities for remote learning for immunocompromised students after the pandemic. And then finally, I would work with Secretary Golf Cruz on issues that go beyond kind of the scope of Yale College, specifically student income contribution and issues related to divestment. I think that starting with someone who has such a high profile, right with President Salve, is a great way of addressing issues that, again, go beyond that scope.
Okay, great. And can we have Matt?
Yeah. So one of our key pillars in our platform has to do with healthcare, because healthcare is a basic right for all students, and it's unacceptable that students on leave of absence right now are not guaranteed healthcare, and those in New Haven on leave of absence have to pay up to $7,300 for self-pay and affiliate pay. So our key goal will be to work directly with Dr. Paul Jennison, CEO of Yale Health, and Ariel Perez, who is Assistant Director of Member Services. Through their work and through cooperation with the administration and advocacy, we know we could get our COVID pillars and policy into place because we've already had conversations with them. Yale is currently an HMO model, and we plan to transition to a PPO model in the long run. During our administration, we want to set the groundwork for this to become possible. And we've already spoken with them, and they said that this is completely feasible. However, there just hasn't been enough advocacy and push for it. Under our administration, that's what we'll do. For the third faculty member, we want to work directly with Dean Howard for FIGLY issues because he understands what needs to get done. He has been a supporter of FLY and other FIGLY issues and organizations on campus, and we believe that with his help, we can get work done.
And then Riley.
Thank you. I'd like to start out with one of Elisa and I's big priorities, which is diversifying Yale College curriculum. That doesn't only mean diversifying the people teaching Yale College curriculum, but also reallocating resources to departments that are able to offer materials including systemic racism and other things that affect intersectional groups that are usually ignored in non-ERNM, non-AFM, and non-WICS classes. So the administrator that we would start with to make this happen is Tamar Gendler, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Science. We would need institutional support from Dean Gendler so that we could then work with every individual department to work on diversifying the offerings that they have. We would also work with the DUS of ERNM, Serena Gruel, so that we can work to allocate more resources for ERNM, which is currently an underfunded and oversubscribed program. Finally, another one of Elisa and I's biggest emphases, is on student accessibility and disability. We're in fact the only campaign that has a comprehensive large-scale platform on students with disabilities and their needs. And so we want to work with the Director of Student Accessibility Services, Sarah Scott Chang, so that we can work to ensure more full-time staff, and a space for students with disabilities to build their own community, which is currently lacking in this Yale. So thank you for the question.
Okay, and then we'll move into our rebuttals. So at this time, if candidates have any concerns or comments about other people's answers, or if they want to expand on their answer, they will have the chance to do so. Candidates, you'll have 1 minute for your rebuttal, and then Clayton will give you a 30-second mark. So Carlos, we'll go ahead and start with you.
I think if I was to expand a little bit on my interactions with Dean Sean, I think also a big part of my policy platform, and I think I have a unique emphasis on this, is establishing a dean for the Middle Eastern North African students. I have a chance to have conversations with their leadership. This is an idea that's novel, but it helps them move towards their goal of getting a Middle Eastern North African house in a time where Yale seems to be unwilling to do things like invest in actual property. And so I think that also be an important interaction with Dean Sean, and that'd be an important step in making sure these students get the recognition that they deserve and stop being erased by the university who seems to refuse to want to give them resources that they need.
Thank you. Matt?
We are the only policies and we have the only platform that has healthcare detailed and outlined. For far too long, the YCC has tried to address issues of healthcare, mental illness, and disability within the infrastructure that Yale currently has. However, we are offering creative solutions to tackle these issues head on. For instance, Yale only has 37 mental health counselors available. If we were to transition to a PPO model that completely attacks that issue head on, diversifying who students can reach out to within New Haven, alleviating pressure from campus. We really believe that if we want to tackle a lot of the core issues within Yale that relate to healthcare, we have to branch away and we have to think creative and we have to think big.
Thank you. Riley?
Yeah, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about healthcare and specifically what I've learned about Matt and Evie's policies on healthcare. First, I want to applaud you for all of your time, effort, and attention to detail that you've taken in developing your healthcare policies. However, I think that something that's missing from your healthcare policies and something that you will find in Elisa and I's platform is a way to attack the problem now. COVID-19 is not waiting. COVID-19 will never affect us more than it does right now. And that's why a lot of Elisa and I's healthcare policies, as well as where our healthcare policies interact with FGLI issues, mental health issues, Title IX issues, that's why our solutions start as soon as we do. So I just wanted to raise that issue because I think that there's room for long-term plans, but I think that if you don't have short-term plans, you are not equipped to take office on Friday. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to the next question. So the next question is, we'll answer these in the order of Riley, Carlos, and Matt. So explain in your words what the role of the YCC vice president is. Do you anticipate it staying the same next year? If not, how will it be different? So Riley, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. So a hallmark of Elisa and I's plan is actually YCC reform. So I served on the Senate for the last year. I'm very familiar with the ways that senators are delegated to certain policies, don't have a lot of ownership over their own policies, and report directly to policy directors. Policy directors are overworked. They don't have nearly enough staff, and they're supposed to keep track of the details and the everyday management of dozens of projects. I think that the role of the vice president next year will be to take some of that load off of the policy directors. And in fact, we will be eliminating the policy director position entirely. Instead, we're going to democratize the YCC. We're going to make every senator that applies, we're going to give them the option to lead their own team. We're going to have an executive board comprised of many, many more students, making many, many more decisions for the student body. So I think the role of the vice president next year will be more in an overseeing role of those team leaders that we're going to appoint, which I think will make not only senators a lot more happy now that they will have ownership and direct responsibility of their jobs, but also will eliminate the stress and the unacceptable workload that was leveled on policy directors this last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos?
I urge those listening to pay close attention to the words that were used in the last statement. The policy directors didn't have enough staff. Mind you, these staff were the people who were elected to represent you. Last year, when Riley's running mate was on the executive board, the Senate voted 4 times, right? They had the opportunity to change the culture when they were in executive positions. They didn't take it. I'm running because of my experience as a senator last year. The role of the vice president is to manage the internal functions of the Senate. That means letting the senators set policy priorities, not pushing out a 30-page platform. It means listening to the voices of students and responding to the needs when the time comes, not later when it becomes politically expedient. True democracy from the YCC means being willing to work on policy priorities that weren't a part of your master plan, policy priorities that come from the people. I imagine the role of the vice president changing next year drastically to one where you actually allow the senators to determine policy, determine everything from the meeting agenda to how we respond to the most urgent issues on campus. And I plan to do that from day one or on Friday. I think that this issue is one I have unique command on. Again, a key factor is why I'm running as an independent president is to bring attention. And I'm so happy that you asked that question. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Matt?
As my opponent stated, the key responsibility of the VP is to manage policy, et cetera. However, one thing that they both lacked in stating is that the YCC has failed to include outside voices into the conversation because they are speaking of expanding within the YCC as opposed to bringing in outside voices. One key reform that we want to make to the YCC constitution is to allow students to apply to the e-board without having to have already served one full term YCC. This will allow students who have a diverse background, a diverse set of experience and lived experience who probably understand the policy much more than students within the YCC because there is such a huge barrier to entry for first generation low income students. Our administration is focused on supporting outside voices and for empowering them as opposed to past YCC candidates and presidents.
Thank you, Matt. We'll move on to the rebuttals. Let's start with Riley.
Yeah, thank you. First, I'd like to address the idea that because I have a 30-page platform, that means that I'm not prepared to react to the needs of students. I think this is a misunderstanding and a mischaracterization of the extent of preparation that I've done for this race. My experience has given me a lot of ideas, and those ideas mean that I'm ready to hit the ground running this Friday. It means that I don't need to wait for senators to bring their own policy ideas, although that is an issue, although that is a process that has been incorporated into the YCC structure for years. That means that we are ready to start helping students this Friday. I also want to address the idea that the YCC keeps out external influences because I think that that is true, and I think that the YCC under Elisa and I will change that. We have set up a structure that allows us to send delegations to other student groups to provide the YCC support for them, as opposed to Matt and Evie's plan of bringing them to us and expanding the YCC structure by creating more committees and incorporating more policy directors from other organizations. Why bring them in when we can go to them and provide our support by sending delegations to their groups? Thank you so much.
Okay, Carlos.
As I said before, the previous speakers had a year to address this issue, right? The YC's cultural change is not going to come from within the inside. And also speaking to student groups, I think it's important to recognize that there is a current culture in the YCC of taking the advice of student groups, but also taking the credit. I think that needs to change day one. I'm not interested in taking the credit. I'm interested in connecting student groups to the administrators and the folks who will help them get the job done in the way they intend, not coping their demands, claiming progress. But beyond that, I think the suggestion that, again, having policies ready for day one, it isn't necessarily, I have policies ready for day one as well, right? But I also want to make sure that the representatives who are elected get the chance to represent. Otherwise, where are they there for? We don't need to send out delegations to student groups. We have the representatives in the Senate. That's important to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. And Matt.
My problem with my opposition is that they have had opportunities to make these, changes a reality while already in YCC, yet they never have. YCC comes in and takes credit for group work. UP is a perfect example. That was a coalition of different groups on campus. However, YCC got all the credit. The YCC, and also to Riley's point about going to these groups and not allowing them in, I think that is a bizarre understatement of how these groups want to be involved with the YCC and want to be directly involved behind the policy-making decisions. For instance, our platforms were written together in collaboration with groups on campus, with YFAM, with BSDY, with TransAO, with Co-op. We've had voices that have come to us and we've come to them to collaborate and work towards a platform that would include the student community and the student voices. I think this just goes to show how disconnected YCC is from the rest of campus and why we need immediate reform.
Sammy?
Oh, great. Yeah, so for the last long question, again, it'll be 2 minutes. This will be Matt, then Riley, then Carlos. Just simply what makes you more qualified than the people you're running against? So Matt, you can begin.
Okay, we'll start off with my experience on campus. As I said, I didn't gear my experience towards student government. However, I worked towards support my communities and nonprofits on campus. I worked directly with Havenly at the time when they were only selling baklava, and it makes me so happy to see that they've expanded to a whole new menu. I've worked with large nonprofit organizations called Rethink New York City that tackles food insecurity through sustainable measures, and I'm so glad to have been a part of that team. I understand how to evaluate large structures and how to improve these structures. But a part of my professional experience, I want to expand upon my personal experience. As I said, I'm a first-generation low-income student, and I understand firsthand the consequences that these policies have. I understand the complexities of healthcare because I was the one with my parents trying to decipher the code. I understand how it is a basic necessity and that how students in these precarious times need healthcare. Yes, I may not be involved within YCC. However, I am a qualified student. My lived experience did not disqualify me from running for this position because I know what needs to be done. I know what it takes because I have those experiences.
And then Riley.
Thank you. I think too often this race is framed in terms of outsider and activist versus establishment insider. I want to be very clear that I have experience in organizing and campus activism too. I was a member of the No Fail Yale Coalition. I was also a co-sponsor of the resolution that brought the YCC to No Fail Yale. I'm so glad that my other speakers have brought up the fact that the YCC has not always been the best sharing credit. I'm also a writer for an intersectional feminist publication on this campus. I've worked on sustainability from both ends, both from the YCC and as a member of Project Right. I'm involved and invested in this community, and not only in the YCC, but I want to be clear that the YCC is an important place that gives you real skills to get things done. Elisa and I will be the most effective presidential and vice presidential ticket because we know how to make policy. We've had experience building relationships with administrators. We know how to gather student data and testimonials. We know how to write policy reports that highlight the real issues and convince Dean Chun, President Salovey, Dean Gendler to make commitments and allocate funding. These are not, excuse me. These are not skills that you can learn on the job, and these are not skills you can learn on the fly. Elisa and I are prepared to take office on Friday, and we're prepared from our experience outside of the YCC, and from the extensive research that we've done to try to address every campus issue in our platform. Thank you.
And then Carlos, yeah.
Every other candidate speaking right now has used the term "we" liberally. I think that's important to focus on. I ran for vice president, not for co-president, and that's an important distinction. The role of the vice president is managing the Senate. I built my campaign on making YC better and a more effective space. Having the most progressive platform, having the longest track record does not matter if you don't create a system where students are actually being listened to, represented, and you don't have enough of a critical eye on the YCC's past to know what it needs to change to get things done. Not only do I have a unique focus on the role of the vice president, but I have conviction to address these issues. I know what it's like to be trailed by the YPD walking back to old campus. I know what it's like to feel unwelcome in a space that was supposed to have welcomed me. I understand these issues in a personal way, but I also understand that I am not the expert in all these issues. The platform is specific to my experience and those I'm close to, I've spoken with and worked with, because I'm willing to listen and to be quiet when the time comes. The vice president is not a microphone. The vice president is a facilitator. And I'm ready day one to the job from experience both in the YCC and outside. Thank you.
Okay, and then we're going to have time for any last comments in the same order.
Yeah, I just want to bring something up. Riley, you came in at the very end of the movement to co-sponsor the resolution. When most of the campus was already on board, the groundwork was done by Figlia international activists, and you signed onto it when it was already finished. I also want to bring up another point. Like I mentioned before, I have these lived experiences, and off the campus, when COVID hit, after my parents came home from the hospital, I knew what had to be done. I worked right in the city. I worked with Iris to deliver food. I worked with Desk to bring food to homeless shelters, etc. And then in the midst of the protests, I worked with my community. I worked with student leaders, with community activists and city council members to push for a civilian review board in my hometown of West Haven. Again, I would like to say that I might not have the YCC experience, but there is so much more than knowing how policy is written because you've done it for 2 years to implement real and tangible material to bring change to the student body and to campus.
Thank you. First, I'd like to speak a little bit about the notion that I, Riley Johnson, came in at the last minute on UP. While it's true that I voted yes and also co-sponsored the resolution for the YCC to join UP, I was also a member of the UP organizing coalition from the day after it was brainstormed, right? I was posting on social media, I was making graphics. This was a really important movement to me because I believe in academic equity and I was willing to show up for my peers who needed the support of a universal pass system. I also want to mention that while YCC experience is not everything, I think that thoughtfulness and I think that completeness and I think that forethought is very important in this race. Elise and I's platform is the only platform that addresses student athletes, for example, or international students. We're the only platform that meaningfully addresses students with disabilities. We're the only platform that meaningfully addresses sexual misconduct. These are facts. These are things that you can check on other people's platforms as well as ours. And I want to bring attention to the fact that this thoughtfulness and this notion of a completeness support of our community is really important. Thank you so much.
My reflex to the previous statement was to also get into the weeds on universal pass fail and no fail Yale. But I don't need to debate my involvement. I named no fail Yale. I came up with the phrase universal pass. But again, that was in collaboration with some of the most talented student organizers and activists I have ever interacted with. There's a reason I didn't bring that policy to the YCC first, because I knew it was broken, and the leaders that would be, the people who have established records, wouldn't be willing to engage and actually address the issue. But again, I think there's an important distinction to be made, right? Between folks who have lived experience, but limited YCC experience, folks who have abundance of YCC experience, but may not exactly be willing to engage and encourage other groups. I think I strike a balance. I'm enough of an outsider to know what needs to be changed, but enough of an insider to know how to get things done from the beginning. And if you want to know about my policy platform, I encourage you to go to my website, carlosyc.com, and there you can see the truth. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. So I'm getting a couple of questions in the chat, so we're going to save all of the questions until the end. Also, it looks like people are raising hands. If you want to just throw your question into the chat, I don't think we'll have to stop recording, so please just, if you want a private message or if you want to publicly message, it doesn't matter, but please send your questions in the chat. So we're going to move on to individual questions. So each of the candidates get one question that is specific to them. They'll have 2 minutes to answer, and that'll be it for this segment. So Carlos, we're going to start with you. You were an active member of the Universal Pass movement. Were there any pitfalls? What do you think could have been better? Are there things you would have changed?
Yeah, so again, I talk a lot about UP because I think it's a major part of the reason I'm running. I remember that time period as 2 or 3 of like the most stressful nights of weeks of my life. I remember calling Khalil the night before and being like, if this doesn't happen, people will be hurt. But I think the movement wasn't perfect. I think because we had to learn so publicly, because we were so public with the way we got things done, sometimes the culture around it became a little toxic. Sometimes some voices were silenced. But in the end, we were able to craft a policy that earned the support of 2/3 of students in the largest YCC survey in Yale College history, with the largest coalition of student support from organizations, because we rooted our policy in equity. We started by talking to the people who are most directly impacted, big league students, rural students, international students. We started with an issue. We made the most progressive solution. We made our case to the student body. We changed when necessary, and we got things done. And so while the UP movement, like any other movement, had its pitfalls, had its failings, I am so, so proud of the work we did then, because that work impacted a lot of students, including me. Thank you.
Okay, so this question is going to be for Riley. You kind of answered it. We came up with these before. Your platform of policies is super comprehensive and detailed. Do you think all of this is possible? And either way, how would you work to prioritize those policy plans? And if you could, just given the amount of ideas that have already been set out in detail, how will you ensure that you're listening to the student body and sort of making any changes in focus, direction, or priorities over the course of the year?
Thank you so much for that question. Yes, I think that our policy platform being so long makes it a little bit hard to approach and makes it a little bit hard to understand how we're going to get everything done. And that's why I think it's so important to consider the way that Elise and I are going to restructure the YCC to make it efficient, to make it democratic, and to make it best suited to making all of the changes that we know need to be made. The reason our platform is so long is not because we are trying to overwhelm you with information. The reason our platform is so long is because we have a concrete idea of everything that needs to change. I'm sorry, I misspoke. We have a concrete idea of so many things that need to be changed. We don't know everything. And that's why we think it's so important to pay attention to our new model of the YCC, a model that a model that sends out YCC members to other student organizations, a YCC that supports other student organizations, not taking credit, providing the institutional channels and the leverage that we have built up since 1972 when we were founded. I also think that our platform comes off often as difficult to accomplish. I think that Elise and I's experience, which no other candidate can claim to have, gives us the knowledge that we can get these things done and gives us the toolkit that will make it possible. Maybe another candidate couldn't do all the things that we can do, but we've got plans, we've got experience, and we've got vision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next or the last question is for Matt. You haven't held a role in the Yale College Council, and you've also never attended a single Senate meeting. A primary job of the Yale College Council Vice President is to run these Senate meetings. How do you plan on running a body that you haven't ever attended a meeting for? Do you feel confident in taking on this responsibility?
We address this in our platform and in our pillars for YCC structural reform. As it is now, the YCC is extremely inefficient in managing the large tasks that have to go underway. Because of this, Ebby and I are focused on creating a new committee, a Figley committee led by a Figley director, a health and wellness committee led by a health and wellness director, and an environmental justice committee with an environmental justice director, and multiple task force that would be led by other student organizations because they have offered to lead these organizations because it relates to their issues and they understand these issues. I also wasn't involved because of the high barriers of entry to the YCC. I realized the hours, the 30 plus hours per week that it took to really manage and to really take on this task. I had to do student jobs to support me and my family. There were so many other exterior factors that were going on that must structurally change. This is why Ebby and I also want to implement a chief of directors to assist the vice president on policy matters so that we could ensure that the YCC runs efficiently in the future and that the job is distributed and allocated equally and fairly, and to ensure that we remove these barriers of entry and encourage Figley students, more marginalized members of the community, to participate in student government.
Okay, great. We're going to move into rapid fire questions. So basically these will either be yes or no questions, we'll tell you, or it'll be some short words, but we'll let you know. And this one is going to be Matt, then Riley, then Carlos. So the first one is, does the administration do a good job of listening to students' demands, yes or no?
No.
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 So a set of yes or no questions. Was the YCC good at communicating with students this year or this past year? Yes or no? We're gonna go Riley, Carlos, and Matt.
Yes.
Yes.
It could be better.
So no. Okay, Sammy.
Just the last question, just describe your work or teamwork ethic in 2 words. And this is going to be Matt, Carlos, then Riley.
Besties.
Collaborative.
Coalitions for progress.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much. We're gonna end with a 30-second closing statement from all of our candidates. Clayton will give you an update at around 20 seconds. So we'll go in the order of Riley, Matt, and Carlos. So Riley, please start us off.
First, I want to thank the entire YDN, Grace, of course, and every student that tuned in for making this debate happen. This year, defined as it is by pandemic and precarity, is about making resources available to students. More than ever, it's about paying attention to the needs of every member of our community. That's why Elise and I wrote this platform that addresses over 30 facets of student life. There is no time to waste and no issue can go unnoticed. I hope my qualifications and my ideas mean something. I hope they convince you that I will be able to deliver the change that I seek. But if you take anything away from this debate, remember my vision of a YCC that lives up to the legacy of activism and change that we have inherited from those who came before. Remember the tradition of showing up for our community and vote for who you trust to carry on that work and give you the Yale that you deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt?
This has been a novel experience for me, but I would like to thank my supporters, Abby, and the campaign for fighting to enact meaningful reform on campus. I believe that radical change across campus and its relation with New Haven is possible, but to get anything done, we need outside voices. We need voices who understand these policies. For far too long, my communities and other marginalized communities have been advocated for, but we've had enough. It's time we are represented at the decision-making table, and it's time that we advocate for ourselves.
Thank you, Matt. Carlos?
I have a hot take. I believe that I am the only candidate on this stage who is running for the office of vice president and not co-president. My name is Carlos Brown Jr., and I'm running for vice president of the YCC because the status quo is not sustainable. COVID-19 has made clear that students need a YCC that's more responsive than reactive. My experience working with inside and outside the Senate to fight policies like UP shows that I'm ready day one to address the issues and to change it in the way that's necessary. I want to leverage student power, show for Black and Indigenous communities, create a community rooted in care, and stand with students wherever they are, no matter their status. It's time for change, so why not now?
Thank you. Let's give a quick round of applause to our vice presidential candidates. This would be a lot nicer if we were all in person, but thank you all so much for speaking with us today. We're going to we're going to go into audience questions now, and hopefully we'll only spend the next maybe 6 to 10 minutes to address some of these questions. So the first question is, Carlos, this is directed to Carlos. Carlos has said controversial statements like Black Yale will find you online to his peers. How does someone who has a history of bullying justify running to represent his peers?
Yeah, so I've heard these accusations, and a lot of them come from Librex. First of all, those statements are not true. I have not said those things. I am a Black man, so it'd be weird for me to think Black men are trash. I do think there are issues in our community, especially with treatment of Black non-men that need to be addressed. But ultimately, I think that if you want to know who I am, ask those who know me best. Ask my friends, ask my community. I'm on the board of 2 AFAM organizations. I'm a member of Model UN team at Yale. I work in a lot of different spaces. People who know me know my truth, and that's not it. I think it's a little bit appalling that a question with that level of hate and misdirection would make it to the debate station tonight, and I'm honestly a little bit disappointed. But again, I respect the right of folks to believe what they want to believe. I ask them to believe me. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Carlos. This next question is from Matt. How are you going to meaningfully address gender inequity and sexual misconduct, given that you are an active member of fraternity life at Yale, an overwhelming source of sexual violence, and also that you and Ebby do not address sexual misconduct in your platform at all?
I mean, that is a fair point. I mean, I do acknowledge my privilege as a straight male in society, and that there is a fundamental issue with fraternities on campus, which is why, while in my time in SIGEP, I had been an active speaker in co-education, and I do not believe that the frats owning or dominating the social space on campus is right or just. However, in our platform, we have already reached out to other groups, to gender minority groups to influence our policy, and we're willing to do that further on.
Great, thank you. This one's for you, Riley. How do you intend to advocate accessibility for Yale students outside of student accessibility services, from live captioning and transcripts recorded lecture to searchable PDFs via Yale Library instead of scans? What are identifiable modes of accessibility you believe should be standard for all students without letters from the SAS?
So actually our accessibility platform focuses on the SAS because we believe that the disability community and the students that work in Defy specifically are the best ones to describe their own needs and work to meet them. So I believe that it is the allocation of resources, the way that Yale does not prioritize the students with disabilities, that cause the foundation of problems that face the community of students with disabilities on this campus. Students that don't have access to example closed captioners, students that don't have access to note takers. This should be the thing that we could do to change this and increase access to these important services is one, remove the barrier for needing a letter of recommendation or a letter of certification from SAS. Any student should be able to access captions for a class. Any student should be able to access notes. Second, we're going to need to increase this funding and thus the staff for the SAS dramatically. We only have a few full-time staff for the hundreds of undergraduates that are registered with the Student Accessibility Services Office. We should have 10 at least, so that they can meet the needs of every student, registered as disabled or not. Excuse me, registered as a student with disabilities or not.
Okay, I have a question for Carlos. So how do you intend to enact your policy platform of giving proper credit to all students and organizations when you have a clear track record of not doing so? And this person who asked this question said that there was failure to acknowledge Universal Pass was a coalition-based movement with many other leaders. Some of them were mentors, and I guess, would you be making public acknowledgements of people you've been working with in the past going forward?
Yeah, well, I think if you, my earlier statement, when I talked about UP, I talked about the incredible organizers and folks we work with. I talked about how I went to them first for even, again, defining and developing the policy, not the YCC for a specific reason. I don't think I necessarily have a track record of taking advantage of student organizations and groups. I think other candidates might, but specifically my record is of only taking credit, only standing with identities and groups for who I know of my contribution and I know what I've worked with. I think that I urge folks to look at my record, look at my statements, from my candidacy statement to my announcement video. Every time I mention UP, I acknowledge the organizers who led the way, and I'm incredibly grateful that I had a chance to work with them in that process.
And then Sammy, I think, has another question. This one's for Riley. If YCC experience is such an important factor, then why are all Yale students allowed to put their name forward to run for president and VP?
I'm not telling you that students shouldn't be able to run for positions or take part in the important work, the important democratic work of the Yale College Council without experience. I'm not even saying that you shouldn't vote for the other candidates. I'm just saying that you should take into account my extensive experience. You should take into account the skills and the passion that all of my work clearly portrays. I think experience is important for efficacy, and I think it's an important demonstration of how effective I will be in office. And I'm asking you to take that into account, not use it as the only factor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then for Matt, Carlos has brought up the difference between the role of VP and president, while you have largely discussed your ticket platform and individual qualifications. What do you?
Repeat that, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So Carlos has brought up the difference between the role of the VP and the president, while you have largely discussed your tickets platform and individual qualifications. What do you see as the role of VP separate from the president?
Well, yeah, I mean, the role of the VP primarily is to ensure inclusion, efficiency, and transparency of the YCC. It's the primary manager of Senate projects and the directors. We currently have 5 directors. However, under our platform, we hope to implement 3 more, as I mentioned: the FIGLY director, Health Awareness director, and Environmental Justice director. And also, it's essential that the VP works with the president, with faculty and admin, as well as the city, to ensure that student voices are heard. So I'm very well aware of the roles and responsibilities of the VP. And I'm looking forward to, if elected, to fulfill that role and to work with the student body.
Okay, I have a question for Carlos and then Riley, and then I think Grace, I think you can get the rest if there are any more. But okay, so for Carlos, you mentioned that I guess Elisa and Riley had time to make changes from the inside and did not. So do you consider your previous YCC position a way to make change from the inside? And if you believe that people can't make changes from the inside, do you consider your potential position as a VP as on the inside? And yeah, I guess, what makes this potential position and previous affiliations not systemic upholding of existing YCC structures?
Yeah, well, first of all, that person had a great question. So in the previous structure of the YCC up to the last year, senators were not given much opportunity to lead the way on policies or changes. But in fact, I did take action. I mentioned on my campaign website about how I almost left the Senate, I almost resigned. I sent a letter to Khalil, we had a conversation. In that very next meeting, they discussed potential changes to make the YCC. They sent a Google form and asked for feedback, and then they took us to get ice cream. Right? That might seem like a small event, but it was an opportunity where I brought a problem up with the YC, and it would enact some change in that moment. But I think the role of the senator and role of vice president are very, very different. I have enough experience to know what's wrong. I have enough of the outsider experience to understand what needs to change and how policy should be made and executed. And so I think I intentionally strike that balance. The role of vice president manages the internal functions of the YCC. I plan to take that role and use it to the full capacity to make sure that students are being represented, as senators have the opportunity to be representatives, and that we get things done, again, like leveraging student power, like showing Black and Indigenous students, like creating a community rooted in care, and sitting with Yale students no matter where they are.
I'm just gonna ask the question for Riley. So having been in student government for so long and making compromises, how can we be sure that you'll push the Yale administration to make radical change, like getting rid of the student income contribution?
Thank you so much for that question. Yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge our past failures and the ways that we wish we'd have conducted ourselves differently. I've been in student government for 2 years, but what that really means is that I've been doing service to my peers by organizing events for 2 years, and I've been in the Senate as a senator for 1 year. Carlos mentioned very accurately that the role of a senator and the role of the vice president is very different. As a senator, I was witness firsthand to the inefficiencies of the YCC, but I was not given the platform or the voice to make those changes. I also raised concerns to those above me. I don't feel that they were adequately addressed, and that's why as vice president, I'm going to reform the YCC by giving senators much more control over the policies that they enact. However, I also want to be clear that I'm rededicating myself every day, every week, every month to the needs of the student body. We will keep ourselves open, we will keep lines of communication open, and we will build coalitions with other student groups on campus to hold us accountable. I know that no YCC will be perfect, but I know that a YCC that is connected to other student organizations and a YCC that is connected to the student body will do the best job of representing their needs and our needs. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will close off with a question for Matt and another one for Carlos. We are getting a ton of questions in the chat, but I don't think we have time to address everything. I highly encourage you all to reach out to these candidates after tonight's session if you have remainder questions that you would like to get answered. Okay. So this is a question for Matt. How does your experience going to a private high school in New Haven County affect your relationship to New Haven when a lot of Yale's actions affect New Haven public schools?
Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, I did go to a private Catholic school in West Haven, Connecticut, but I have to be honest, that's to be a bold assumption to make that just because I went to a private Catholic high school that my parents put together the money to afford, even though it's very strenuous on them, that I have for some reason some disconnection with the city. And to be honest, I think I have the most connection, most understanding of the city compared to my other candidates. For instance, in Riley and Elisa's platform, they specifically mentioned that they want to add shuttle lines to North Haven and to honestly drive influence away from the city. I don't think a lot of Yale students realize that the New Haven shuttle and the Yale shuttle, and the New Haven Transit and the Yale shuttle compete head to head. However, the Yale shuttle is free for students, faculty, and admission and administrators. Yale should be more involved with the community. Yale should subsidize CT transit passes so that the student body could work with the city more, so that there is less division within the city. This is not a new proposal. This isn't a radical idea. Justin Elliker is in support of this policy. I spoke with him 2 years ago when he was running for the campaign. However, for some reason, the YCC continues to advocate for more shuttles to divert more and more resources from the New Haven community. And honestly, I'm a little offended that my relation to New Haven was attacked. I mean, again, I was born here. I might have run up 10 minutes down the road, but my family has worked here. Every week I would come here during high school to really enjoy my time in the city and work with the city and work with community leaders. And that's all I have to say for this question.
Thank you. And then the last question is for Carlos. How can you commit yourself to the important role of the YCC vice president when you fail to attend half of the YCC Senate meetings during your tenure as a Davenport senator?
Yeah, so that's a lie. That's not accurate to my representation and my involvement in the YCC Senate. I think that the Senate did fail to live up to the promise of giving senators opportunity to present their concepts and to address the necessary issues that were facing campus. Most Senate meetings could have been email. Remember, we only debated 4 times and we only voted 4 times. So I encourage you to check the record, and also look at what the Senate was doing last year and determine whether you think that missing one meeting because the YC has an inflexible policy, missing a couple meetings, the YC has an inflexible policy, was that big of a deal.
Okay, well, we're going to move on now to the president position, and it's going to be the same structure. We have 2 minutes of opening statements, and then we'll answer questions, rapid fire questions, and then closing statements as well.
Sorry, really quick. If the vice presidential candidates, thank you so much for answering all of those questions and addressing a lot of our constituent concerns. We are going to switch over to the president now. So if you can turn off your cameras for the remainder of this call. Again, please feel free to reach out to all of these candidates via email. They will all be readily available. So please go ahead and turn off your cameras at this time. And for the presidential candidates, we have Elisa Bari and Abby Phillips. So if you both can turn on your cameras at this point in time, that would be great. Thank you.
Grace, I think the host may have stopped my video.
Sorry, your video was on. Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay, so we're going to begin with opening statements, and it's going to be Abby, then Elisa, and those are going to be 2 minutes. And just like before, Clayton's going to send when you have 30 minutes left on chat.
Hi, sorry, Matt and I are in the same room, so the echo. Hi, all. I grew up in Kentucky as a low-income queer person of color, living in a single-parent household where we subsisted off of food stamps, Medicare, and welfare to make ends meet. I've lived in tenement housings, I am an immigrant, and I was on free and reduced lunch in my public high school. COVID-19 only exacerbated the struggles I and my communities face on a daily basis. My mom was unemployed earlier this year, leaving us with no income, no health insurance, and no hope during a global pandemic. I'm running for YCC president because I have skin in the game. I know how to create progressive and meaningful policies that engages our communities. Every policy on the platform has been written in collaboration with student orgs, community members, and with the advice of administrators. My experiences from being Franklin's YCC senator to spearheading one of the largest coalitions to advocate for UP, to creating and leading the queer affinity network within the YCC, to being the vice president of the Benjamin Franklin College Council, to sustainability liaison, and to pioneering the creation of the $100,000 Student Green Innovation Fund, the first green fund of its kind in the nation, has prepared me to make progressive and intersectional change. I care deeply about my communities and our future. I will work tirelessly to ensure that these reforms are carried out, because if they aren't, then it's me, my family, and my friends who will not have health insurance, who will be denied access from resources because we are queer, and who will be continued to be housing and food insecure, and who have and who will continue to be the most affected by this pandemic. When you vote for me and Matt Murillo, you're voting for a community activist with a track record of success, guided by compassion for our marginalized communities and a deep desire to tackle inequities we've been facing our entire lives. I like to change that empowers you. I like to change that cares for you. I like to change for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa, you can begin your statement.
Sure, thank you, Sammy. Hi, all. I'm Elisa, and I'm a rising junior from Poly Murray, and I'm majoring in film and media studies and political science. You all obviously know me as a YCC presidential candidate. I'm running for YCC president because I want to continue fighting for the Yale that you deserve, a Yale that is safe, equitable, and just. And let me tell you a little bit more about what that looks like. To me, a safe Yale is one that expands safety net, is transparent about the community compact enforcement and response plans should we have to evacuate campus. It's one that prioritizes mental health through hiring more LGBTQ+ and BIPOC mental health clinicians, makes medical and safe sex supplies easily accessible to students, and takes sexual misconduct seriously. An equitable Yale is one that fully supports student accessibility services, creates mentorship programs for women, facilitates a safer class climate and culture for LGBTQ+ students, increases resources for low-income students, and much more. And to create a more just Yale, we must support efforts for Yale to pay its fair share, recognize Local 33, disarm and defund the YPD, eliminate the student income contribution, and divest from fossil fuels, private prisons, and Puerto Rican debt. You can learn more about how we plan to tackle over 30 campus issues at the YaleYouDeserve.com, and not one deserves to be left out. And frankly, as important as ideas are, experience and a record of getting things done, of delivering real change, is so important, because whoever is elected this Friday starts this Friday. Riley and I have experience serving at every level of student government, and our record includes protecting leadership positions for students on a leave of absence, co-organizing the inaugural Climate Crisis Summit with YSEC, making permanent the distribution of menstrual hygiene products to every residential college, securing free meals for students over the break with YFAM and YHAP when the dining halls are not an option, founding YCC's first affinity group, establishing a cultural center shuttle stop, creating a campus-wide women's mentorship program, eliminating the financial penalty to move off campus, co-leading the effort for YCC to join the EJC, relaunching the residential college shuttle service, creating the Yale Health Committee, and so much more. I am really excited to tell you all about my ideas, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me.
Awesome, thank you both. So we'll move on to the full answer questions. We originally had 4, but we're going to actually cut them down to 2 because we are short on time. So you both have 2 minutes max. You'll be given a warning at 1:30. So for this round, so Sammy, do you want to go ahead and ask the question?
Yeah, so this question is going to be name 2 things the current YCC administration did and is doing wrong, and how would you improve on those shortcomings? And it would be Elisa first, and then the same thing, we'll have a chance for rebuttals after.
Sure, thank you so much for that question. So firstly, I think that there is a serious need for YCC structural reform. I think that too many projects are being allocated to 3 people to oversee very different issues. And I think it's very important that when we reform the YCC to become more efficient, that we are centering student voices and making sure that the organizations that are best equipped to tackle issues are the ones that are leading the charge with YCC's support. Secondly, I think that the YCC needs to do a lot more to engage with movements on campus to hold Yale accountable. Currently, YCC's primary involvement with a lot of coalitions and movements is reposting information about their events to their social media. And while I admire the attempt to bring awareness to campus events that students should be mobilized around, I think that it's very important that we do more direct outreach to learn how we can best support organizations that are working towards recognizing Local 33, disarming and defunding the YPD, divestment, and so many more issues. Thank you so much for the question again.
I would say the first issue is mental health reform. A lot of the YCC, for the past 10 years, the YCC has continued to strive to help Yale mental health alleviate its wait times and cut down and increase the number of therapists available, but we're looking at it from the wrong angle. The system is not built to be successful because it is an HMO system. We need to transition to a PPO model that gives students more options in order to have healthcare providers. Right now, Yale students are only allowed to go to get healthcare if they are covered under Yale Basic and Yale Specialty coverage within the state of Connecticut and participating in Yale clinics within the state of Connecticut. That's not feasible. We have one of the lowest patient to clinician ratios, yet we are still overburdened within our infrastructure because the infrastructure was never built to be successful. We need a transition in order to have students have access to hundreds of healthcare professionals within the New Haven area for therapy, but also nationwide we'll get coverage like other universities have already implemented, such as Harvard and Columbia, going through Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield and Aetna. The second policies that the YCC has implemented or tried to implement are sustainability policies. We did a great job of making this Student Green Innovation Fund a reality, $100,000 going to sustainability initiatives and being able to fund student projects by students leading students, for students to lead their own sustainability projects and for it to be funded. However, all that burden was on me and my task force director, Kian Azar, to manage 7 sustainability projects, but that isn't sustainable. That's never how I envisioned the SCHIF to be designed. It should be governed by the students, for the students, so that student activists can make their own sustainability policies. I should not be the one governing it. That's why we're going to move forward and create a sustainability director position and an environmental justice committee that allows for these sustainable projects to be continued and for it to be a more democratized process.
Okay, and then Elisa, if you have anything to say.
Sure. So I strongly disagree with the priority of this administration being transitioning to an entirely different model of healthcare. That is not the way to respond to the immediate needs of students. Students are facing housing insecurity, food insecurity, healthcare emergencies right now. And I think that one of the things that Riley mentioned that I really agree with is that our platform is far better equipped to respond to the immediate needs of students. I also want to speak to YCC's record on mental health because frankly, I'm very proud of the the accomplishments that we've had. But of course, I know that there's so many more ways in which we can improve. And that includes founding the Mental Health Consortium, which is a coalition of mental health organizations on campus, the first of its kind. It also includes cutting wait times in half. It includes securing a commitment from Director Hoffman to recruit a cultural competency trainer at the recommendation of Dean Yee of the AACC. And it also includes a mental health and counseling meet and greet, which is, of course, not sufficient to tackle many of the issues that mental health that we face through MHNC, but I think it's a pretty good start. Of course, we have more to do, but I'd like to indicate that this experience shows that I have the record to make it happen.
Yeah, I'd like to touch back on healthcare. As it's clearly stated on our platform, there are several short-term goals that we will be advocating for within our health and wellness pillar. First is to expand Yale basic coverage to all LOA students within the city of New Haven, because right now they're not covered with no insurance whatsoever. Second is creating a COVID task force led by a health and wellness director in order to manage these short-term reforms, such as subsidizing the self-pay and affiliate coverage that Yale Health is now offering, because it is infeasible and unrealistic to pay $7,332 a term in order to get health insurance when it's usually $2,548. And second, we are going to be setting the groundwork to transition Yale to from an HMO to a PPO model. This is not going to happen within one term, and we're very well aware of that. But if we don't think critically of how we can transform the systems that have been binding us to an inefficient healthcare system, then we're not looking at the right places. We're not creating intersectional and progressive policies. We're working within systems that were never built for us to begin with. And second, I would like to touch on Elisa's outreach point. The YCC has a horrible reputation of coming into student organizations, infiltrating these student organizations, taking their work and taking credit for it. There's been several of a history with candidates on this stage that have come into groups like BSTY and YFAM and Figley organizations when they didn't even ask for it, taking their ideas, implementing them, and giving a half-watered down version to the communities when we didn't ask for those. We're not going to be that kind of YCC, and we're never going to be that kind of YCC.
Okay, thank you both. We're going to move on to the next question. The next question is, we'll start with Abby and then we'll go to Elisa. So what makes you more qualified to run the position than your opponent?
I think my background contextualizes my experiences. I came here as an immigrant with my family with $100 and 2 suitcases among the 4 of us. It's a classic immigrant story. I lived in tenement housing. I subsisted off of welfare. I was on food stamps. I had free and reduced lunch. I know the problems of COVID because they've been exacerbated even more so in my entire lifetime because my mom was unemployed earlier this year. I had to work several student jobs throughout my time at Yale in order to provide for me and my family. I know especially well how COVID has exacerbated several social inequities that have always been apparent within our society. In addition, I have the experience to back up to implement progressive and intersectional reforms that previous YCC senators and university service directors have never implemented before. First of all, I created the Student Green Innovation Fund, $100,000 green fund, unlike any other green fund in the nation, which the University of Oxford and UVA are starting their own models, and the U Chicago has already implemented a model based upon my own. I've managed 7 sustainability projects, from the Sustainable Laundry Initiative to the Cleaning Closet to Shareware to Green Fleet to the Energy Audit Program to the READ Program and the Solar Bench Initiative. These are 7 projects I managed. I also was the vice president of the Benjamin Franklin College Council. I created and led the Queer Affinity Network to lower barriers of entry for queer students to join the YCC. I also was one of the founding members of the UP movement with the coalition that we worked together to make UP a reality. I have a track record of success, but it's informed by my background and my experiences, because right now we need representation from Figley communities, from queer communities, from communities of color, because without that, then our policies are not intersectional. We can't be represented for, but we must represent ourselves now.
I'm sorry, Grace, did you say something? I didn't hear it.
Elisa, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, of course. So I think that one of the most important things I learned as University Services Director is that no one person can know so intimately the experiences of all others. For example, no other candidate in the race besides Riley and I can know the experience of being a woman. No one on the stage can know my experience of being a woman of color. And these, of course, inform the way that we choose to approach our work in student government. But the best way forward is for our leaders to make sure that they are listening and centering the voices of students who are best equipped to do the work that they have decided to take on. For example, a lot of our platform in terms of how we choose to structure YCC is based on sending students out to support organizations that are already equipped to do the work that they do. Evie and Matt's platform is about creating a sustainability director position. I think that the organization that does that best is YSEC. They have the funding and the institutional capacity to do it, and I think we should be sending students to support them. I think the organization best equipped to tackle issues related to FGLI students is YFAM, which is why I think we should be sending our students to support their efforts rather than creating duplicate committees to do that work. So that's how I choose to approach issues that's how I choose to approach issues that I am not intimately acquainted to. And that's how I hope every leader, and that's how I hope any leader in the YCC hopes to approach issues they're not intimately acquainted with based on
right
experiences.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we're gonna go back to Evie. If you have any comments, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the sustainability director position, and with YSEC, I completely agree that YSEC is best suited to run environmental concerns. Also, student groups like Green and other environmental justice advocate groups already on campus. We should stop infiltrating these student groups that we've already done in our past YCC experiences. This is not what we want our future YCC to look like. We don't want to send YCC members to fly meetings or to these meetings, taking their ideas and then implementing themselves. We should create sections already carved out for these groups, FIGLY groups, sustainability groups, environmental justice groups on campus, in order for them to carve out a space for themselves within the YCC, use our resources, use our institutional knowledge, and let us provide a supporting role instead of making YCC senators sustainability directors for people not involved in the movement. That's not what we're asking for. And all these policies that we're implementing and we've proposed, we've done it in collaboration with FIGLY groups and with sustainability groups. And we have the okay from organizations like the Office of Sustainability to create environmental justice committees that they think is a good idea. So we fact checked all this. We have to do it because it's our life.
So Elisa, do you want to give any feedback?
Yeah, sure. I'll respond to that. So we talk a lot about infiltrating the groups that we plan to work with. That's why I particularly don't understand the platform point about having a YCC task force led by a BSDY director, for example. I don't know why we're creating a separate task force when BSDY is the best equipped to do the work of BSDY, in my opinion. And that's why I think that instead, if they're welcome or if they're needed, we should be sending support from YCC to that organization rather than creating an entirely separate task force to be led by them, given that they're the ones who do that work best. I think that same concept applies to our approach to sustainability, to our approach to supporting low-income students. And so if we want to talk about centering other student groups, then we shouldn't be creating new committees that already do the work that they do and appointing directors that already do that would be responsible for the same leadership that it already exists in other organizations best equipped to do that work. That's what I think that Riley and my platform accomplishes, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk about it more as we go on to this debate.
We'll ask questions that are specific to each candidate. So Sammy, do you actually want to take the question for Elisa?
Yeah, so you posted a campaign poster to the Yale College Council Instagram page. Do you believe this was an unfair advantage? And what do you believe would be a fair penalty action for this?
Yeah, I'm truly so sorry for the mistake. I have that account as the University Services Director, and I must have forgotten to click the button. Whatever the CEC decides is a fair penalty is one that I'm willing to accept because I made that mistake, and I know that I'm an imperfect person who can slip up sometimes. So truly, whatever that penalty should be, I am more than happy to accept it. Yeah, I really don't. I apologize to my fellow candidates for that slip up. I'm glad it was only posted for around 20 minutes, but I hope I hope that fellow students know that I am reflective of those actions and hope to do better in the future.
Okay, wait, sorry. This question got switched up with the one that we had before. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, oh geez, it just got deleted from every doc. Okay, the question had to do with the community compact. But basically, Abby, you posted a video online. I think it was your campaign video. But in it, you were walking around campus not wearing a mask. Do you believe that this violates the community compact? And what should the admin do when people do break the community compact?
That's a really good question. I'd love to clear that up. Every member of that video was a part of our pod that we all live on the same floor right down the street from each other. It's a pod of 8 people with like Haran and my running mate, Matt Murillo. And we made sure every time we did film like a scene that had like us without a mask on, it was without other people in like the nearby vicinity, making sure it's 6 feet apart and making sure we are following CDC guidelines. So we paid very careful attention to that and to make sure that we are ensuring the compliance with the compact. In addition, for when students do break the compact, it has to be treated as a health concern, and it can't be treated as a disciplinary concern unless it's like especially egregious. Because students need to be informed about how to best have best health practices and not be continuously or more punitive measures put on them. It should be more of an informational, educational experience for them instead of a very punitive measure, unless of course it's especially egregious. Thank you. Sorry, Grace, you're cutting out for me on my end.
Oh, sorry. Okay, can you all hear me now? Okay, great. So we're going to move over to the rapid fire questions. Again, these are either yes or no or short answer questions. And then after that, we'll move on to the closing statement and extend the opportunity to all the folks out there to ask questions. So the first question, so we'll go ahead and start Abby and then Elisa, and then we'll alternate per question. So this one's for you, Abby, first. Should Yale defund the YPD, yes or no?
Yes.
Elisa?
Yeah.
Could you describe your campaign and your platform in 3 words? And it's Elisa, sorry, first, yeah.
It's about creating a more safe, just, and equitable Yale. 3 words being safe, just, and equitable.
For all of us.
Great. So this one's for you, Abby, and then Elisa. Was the game protest last year a good way to enact policy changes, yes or no?
Absolutely. And I think we should talk about that more in detail in the questions section, but yes, absolutely.
Elisa?
100%.
Okay, is the SIC as it stands right now fair?
No.
No.
Okay, this one's for you, Abby. And then Elisa. Should Yale send students home if there is a COVID outbreak on campus? Yes or no?
It again depends on the background, if they're legally and if they don't have any safe places
It's
to go.
just a yes or no question.
Depends. No, not a full blanket statement.
I don't think this can be asked as a yes or no question. I think that would be that would disregard the nuance at hand for many different students.
Okay, this can be a few short words. What is the #1 issue Yale students face right now? And that's, is it Elisa? No?
I can go.
Oh, okay, it's Evie then, right?
No, Abby started last time, so it's Elisa's turn.
Elisa.
Yeah, threats to their health and the health of their loved ones.
Healthcare access and expanding Yale health coverage.
And then the last question, is Yale's reopening plan fair to students? That's the first one, and the second one is to New Haven. Was it fair to New Haven? So yes or no, let's start with Abby.
I would say more or less so, but again, it has more nuance to it. So for students, I guess there should have been more protections available. And then for New Haven residents, I think there should have been more consideration on what reopening would mean to New Haven residents.
No.
Okay, we just need like a yes or no answer. Like we get that these questions are definitely very open-ended, but we just need a quick yes or no answer. So can we go back to that, please? Is Yale's reopening plan fair to students, yes or no? If it is in any way not fair, you can just say no.
No.
It's not fair at all.
Okay, and then to New Haven?
No.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the closing statement, and then we'll accept questions from the audience. Elisa, please give your 30-second closing statement.
Sure. On YCC and outside of it, I've had the privilege of working with and working under campus leaders from across Yale. And if there is anything I've learned, it's that YCC is about centering the students who are already leading the fight to make Yale a better place. Please do not forget, whoever wins on Friday starts on Friday. Our budget needs to be decided this week or next week. We need to plan to get students out to vote in 50 days. The YCC survey needs to be circulated this month. There is so much work to do. If you don't have a vision for academics, supporting NINA, funding student accessibility services, then you don't have it for the full year. There is no 3-month preparation period this time. So whoever you choose, make sure that there's someone who's going to hit the ground running on Friday.
My background has forged my experiences, my insight, and my passion for social justice. We have skin in the game. We're not doing this for our resumes, we're doing it for our lives and our community's lives. Because if we don't succeed, our families and friends will suffer the most. Bullet points aren't comprehensive, lived experiences are. We need to elect a president and a VP who knows the struggles of COVID and will fight tirelessly to alleviate the inequities we have faced our entire lives.
Thank you. So we'll move over to the questions. We're actually, I think Sammy and I think it might be a good idea to just give folks in the audience on a first come first serve basis to ask questions. Sammy, do you think that's better than just us going through the chat, or what do you think?
I think that's a good idea, at least to start while we sift through this. If anyone has any questions that they can say aloud,
please raise your hand, and then we'll go ahead and call on folks. Great. Siddharth?
My question is for Abe. So you talked about in your platform changing Yale Health's model from an HMO to a PPO. I was wondering, do you think this is realistic? Have you had any conversations with officials about this plan? Because the entire point of the HMO model is to keep costs low and to keep care local to Connecticut. So that obviously benefits Yale. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
This is a great question, Siddharth. And yes, we have talked to Yale administrators about this. We've had meetings with Dr. Paul Jennison and conversations with Ariel Perez, who's the assistant manager of member services from Yale Health. And we've talked about what transitioning from an HMO model to a PPO model means. And other universities have already done it, like Harvard and Columbia, who go through Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield and Aetna. This is essential in order to provide more healthcare access to students, even when they're outside of Connecticut, because no student should go without healthcare access wherever they are, regardless of enrollment status or location, because healthcare is a human right. And of course, this is a long-term goal, but I think it's still one that it's worth advocating for. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Iris.
Hi, I have a question for Evie. You talk a lot in your platform about how you have skin in the game with LGBTQ+ issues, healthcare availability, the FIGLY community. Like, what about issues that affect groups that you're not a part of, like the voices of women, remote students, students on a leave of absence? Can you talk about how you're going to account for that?
Exactly. I can't speak to the experiences of women or Black students. I can't speak to those experiences. That's why Matt and I have made a comprehensive platform to include those voices and carve out space within the YCC for their organization to have a voice and to implement policies that best benefit their communities. The YCC, and especially a YCC that Matt and I will run as a supporting figure to these voices, because we don't know their experiences, so we have to best support them in whatever way we can.
Thank you. The next question is from Ryan Martinez.
This question is for both candidates. Both candidates have talked about doing things and acting on coming into office on day one, and that it starts on day one. How will you determine which policies from your platform to prioritize first?
So Elisa, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. So the immediate needs of students right now pertain to their health, to housing insecurity, to food insecurity, and more. So one of our first priorities is learning how to expand safety net. We also need to not only expand the amount that is provided, but we also need to clarify how safety net can be used to cover medical costs, as well as expand the categories it can be applied to cover the costs of new technology, housing, food insecurity, and more. Additionally, we need to open it to students who are currently on a leave of absence that could very much benefit from those services. So it's very important to us that emergency funds are created. This is, I think, where I stand and I disagree with I think, Abby. I don't believe that we should be creating a new medical hardship fund, because Creating a new fund is a lot of bureaucratic work that is very time intensive. Safety net is the fund that is best equipped to help students in emergency situations, and we should be focusing on improving it and clarifying it for students. Additionally, I think that we need to be focusing a lot on civic engagement. Elections are 50 days away. This is a huge I mean, every election is important, but this is an especially important year. And there's been very little talk about civic engagement efforts from any other candidate. So I want to emphasize how important it will be for me to make sure that students are able to get out to vote, to serve as poll workers, to help others in their community get to polls, by making sure that administrators are more flexible with students. And this means allowing dean's excuses to cover dean's excuses to allow students to vote, to basically do whatever they need to engage with their community that day. And finally, I think that one of the most important priorities to me, again, and that has been near and dear to me, is mental health reform, because this has been such a difficult time for students, and now more than ever, people need the support they need, need to be able to get the support they need as soon as they need it. So it's very important to me that I continue working with Director Hoffman to ensure that students are able to get the support they need from mental health clinicians at Yale.
And to address the question of what's the first priority, it would be creating a COVID task force and appointing a health and wellness director, like how several other student governments across the nation have already done to address healthcare concerns. And then the first priority after that will be to extend the deadline in order to apply and be in self-pay or affiliate care through Yale Health, and from the September 15th deadline to an indefinite deadline, and prorate the rest. The second will be to extend Yale basic coverage to every student within New Haven, regardless of their enrollment status, because several, like dozens and hundreds of students don't have healthcare insurance right now. The third is to subsidize self-pay and affiliate care down from the $7,300 to $2,500 in order to make it more accessible for low-income students, and subsidizing the rest through Yale College. And the fourth is to create a COVID rider program that students wherever they are within the nation can have access to healthcare coverage, like how we're already seeing with the travel rider program, but making sure it's accessible cost-wise.
Awesome, thank you. Clayton, so to the folks that are running, we are short on time and we do have a lot of questions, so we're going to ask that you keep your responses below a minute and a half. So Clayton, can you please adjust the timer, please? The next question is from Mitchell.
Hi, this question's for Evie. I'm wondering, as a supposed advocate for both the queer community and healthcare reform, what would you do to support the much needed reform to trans healthcare, both mental and physical, at Yale?
Thank you for asking that question. We actually have a comprehensive platform for Pillar 5 that addresses trans healthcare needs. Tremendously unaddressed, or very resources are being devoted to trans healthcare currently. First, we need to improve the My Gender tool that's currently on Yale Health, because that's not available, that's not being as publicized as it needs to, and it's not getting to the correct rosters that it needs to. Second, we need to work on expanding coverage to all students, because if we don't cover coverage to all students, then a lot of students, especially queer students, will be most disadvantaged by the current Yale Health situation. And third, we have to work towards including trans and queer voices within the YCC and expanding more people to join who are from queer backgrounds, because we're very highly underrepresented within the YCC. And if you look at our Pillar 5 for trans healthcare, we have listed out several points of how we need to reform the YCC and how we need to reform Yale Health over a long-term period, but also short-term inequities that can happen, like expanding safety net coverage for medical hardship funds, to expand it for trans students who need basic supplies, such as binders, and making that accessible and more publicized to the student body. Thank you.
Mary Chen, are you still there?
Yes. So my question is going to be worded a little different for both candidates, but it's regarding the same thing, just based off of experience. So for Elisa, like having been in student government for so long and like having to make compromises like you talked about earlier with bureaucratic tape, how can we be sure that you will push the Yale administration to make these radical changes? For example, getting rid of the student income contribution. That's been a conversation that's been happening for way too long. So how are you going to cut through the tape with that? And for Abby, in regard to your experiences, how have you seen successful experiences where you have cut through or like will make these radical changes? Because again, like the only successful thing I see is with UP. But again, UP was more so of a circumstantial experience.
I'm so glad you asked. Thank you so much, Mary.
Can you just read the letter at the very least?
Hi, folks. Again, can you please keep yourselves on mute for the remainder of this call, please? Thank you.
So I want to clarify that Riley and I think, have been very intentional about the language that we use in our platform in a way that I don't think is very similar in others. We claim that we will advocate and support SUN to eliminate the student income contribution. We claim that we will advocate and support BSDY to disarm and defund the YPD. But we are not going to claim that, we are going to do these things, given that activists who have been fighting on the forefront of this issue for years haven't been able to, so we're not going to make the claim that it'll be us. What we can promise you is that we're going to fight as hard as we can to support the organizations that are best equipped to tackle police brutality, the student income contribution, and other pressing issues facing Yale. Secondly, I do feel like I have a record on substantial, honestly, like radical, progressive change, right? Like menstrual hygiene products are not available in most schools. I'm very proud of the work that my team did to make that available in every residential college, so that students have a very necessary resource if they're living on campus, and I would love to work to expand that to make sure that students on a leave of absence also have access to those necessary resources. Additionally, I'm also very at the 30 seconds. Oh, thank you, Clayton. Also, additionally, I think one of the reasons why I feel pretty confident that I can be a good support system in taking on these very difficult challenges is because of my record on a host of campus issues, from securing meals to provide to students over the breaks, obviously with collaboration with YHAP and YFAM. YHAP is the one that proposed the idea and worked really powerfully with us on this, to creating a cultural center bus stop. So if you want to check out more about the work that we've done on a host of campus issues, feel free to check out our platform.
Thank you, Mary. That was a really good question. Besides UP, I created the Student Green Innovation Fund, which is $100,000 being reallocated from the Office of Facilities and given back to the student body in order to create, manage, and implement their own sustainability projects. This is really huge because this is the first green fund of its kind in the nation that gives power directly back to the students instead of going to financiers and consultants. And we've been able to do a lot of really great policy changes, and things are in the works for the Office of Facilities and the Office of Energy Management, because now we have a sustainable laundry initiative within the works where we subsidize laundry products such as drying balls and laundry detergent, when usually it was you had to pay for it by yourself and you couldn't be able to subsidize laundry machines themselves. So we've created change there. We've also created change to the cleaning closet initiative that we can put, that students can rent out cleaning supplies like vacuums from their head of college office instead of buying them continuously. A sustainability initiative, but also intersectional because it helps first generation low income students. But I think going back to the issue of compromise, I think what is really different about me and my opponents is that I was one of the Harvard-Yale protesters that were arrested. My opponents sat on XCOM and gave us disciplinary actions against that. So I think that's an important distinction that we have to take into account. Thank you. Grace, I think you cut out, sorry.
Hi, okay, so we are short on time. We've been going for an hour and 40 minutes. So I think we're going to take 2 more questions and then go from there. So the next 2 hands that I see are from JP and Ryan. So I'm sorry to everyone else who didn't get a chance to ask questions, but please feel free to reach out to the candidates via email. I'm sure they're more than happy to answer any remainder of the questions that you might have. But for tonight, we're going to end with JP and Ryan. So JP, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
So this is a question for Eve. So you mentioned expanding Yale healthcare access to students currently on leaves of absence. How do you envision that also being expanded to withdrawn students, especially students who are withdrawn for mental health care reasons, and then immediately their access to Yale mental health historically has been halted and prevented?
Exactly. This is a really, really good question. I think we should divide between the short-term strategies and long-term strategies. So short-term strategies is to expand Yale health coverage so that every student currently under a COVID rider system, through expanded Yale Basic, and through a subsidized affiliate pay system, that every student, no matter where they are within the United States, will have healthcare coverage. The long-term strategy is to make sure that we fundamentally change how Yale Health operates. And if we move and transition to a PPO model over the course of several years, students who are withdrawn and will still be affiliated with their Yale health coverage through the third-party providers such as Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, or Aetna, or whatever other provider we do choose to affiliate ourselves with, which will give them healthcare access and mental health care access, whether they are withdrawn or not, because they're still covered under the insurance policies. And if they're not, then we will fight as an administration and future administrations to make sure that they are included within these initiatives. But that was a really great question. Thank you.
Ryan, are you still here?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't hear you for a second. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Ask your question.
All right. Yeah, my question's for both candidates. So a few months ago, the YCC delayed elections without input or consent from the Yale student body. And I know a lot of students were upset about that, including a lot of students on Librex. And they wanted, and I think a lot of them would like to know, do you guys support the actions of the YCC to delay the elections? And under what circumstances would you delay the elections again in the future? Thanks.
I'm sorry, who's going first? Do you care, Grace?
Yeah, Elisa, do you want to go ahead and go first, and then we can finish off with Abby?
Yeah, sure. So I can empathize with how frustrating it must be for students to not have the opportunity to elect a new leader. Trust me, this isn't easy for Abby and I either. We're going into this role with literally like no transitioning whatsoever. Like we don't have that 3-month period to create a vision, to plan, to implement our strategy. Like we don't have the 3 months of transitioning. Like trust me, it's not easy for us either. But I will say that this decision was the right one to make sure that these elections were more equitable and accessible, right? If students who wanted to run were in the midst of a family emergency because of this outbreak, if they were facing housing insecurity and food insecurity, they would not have been able to participate in these elections fairly. And you know, the playing field is never even. So I'm not going to pretend this fixes it, but it definitely makes it a lot better. So I agree with Khalil's decision to delay the elections, not because I wanted to extend my administration. I was planning to be involved in the YCC no matter what. I'm running for it, which means that I love this organization. And of course, even if I lost this race, I would still plan to be involved. But that said, the reason why I supported it is because I wanted it to be fair. We didn't have competitive elections last year, and that was a problem. We need to have choice in the students that get to run, and that means we need to make the conditions for running at least as equitable as possible, and that required delaying this race. So I stand by that decision.
And I have to say that it was the right decision to delay elections, because like me and Matt would not have been able to be on the Zoom call right now because both our families were going through health emergencies. Our parents were unemployed. We didn't have healthcare access. We wouldn't have had the time nor the resources nor internet access in order to be going on the Zoom call right now to say our piece, to say what we believe in, who we are. So I did support the move to delay elections to the fall. Or we wouldn't have been on the Zoom call right now. So we did support the delay in elections. Thank you.
And the second part of my question was, under what circumstances would you delay them again?
I don't think I plan not to delay them again unless we are facing another global pandemic. Like this was a very, very unique circumstance that I think warranted this occasion. Otherwise, we would not delay elections. That 3-month period to prepare is very, very important.
Yeah, I don't foresee any situation where we will delay elections again, and I will not advocate for that. This was, again, a global pandemic, and hopefully there's not another one that comes up in the next 6 months, fingers crossed. Thank you.
Thanks for answering my question, guys.
Of course. Thanks for asking, Ryan. I get that it's been a very vocalized concern.
Okay, and I guess that was our last question. So this is officially over. Thank you to the candidates. I hope that everyone who was here got a chance to learn more about the people who are running. And yeah, Grace, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, thank you all so much for coming. It looks like people are leaving by flies, but please go ahead and vote. The voting portal opens on Thursday at 9 a.m. You definitely don't have to vote at 9 a.m., but it's open until 9 p.m. on Friday, so please cast your votes for all of these candidates. They're working very hard. So please come up and vote. And other than that, enjoy the rest of your night. And hopefully we'll see your ballots in the inbox on Friday night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
Bye, Sammy.
There's a question in the chat about whether this recording will be shared. It will be shared. This will be posted somewhere via YCC links. Thank you, everyone.